Good morning, everyone. I'm Charissa Sims, live event host for Humanities Team, a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to make conscious living pervasive worldwide by 2040. And I'm coming to you live from Lafayette, Colorado. And you can see our guest today, Dr. Jonathan Ellerby. And our topic is Gateways of Spiritual Experience. And I want to welcome his audience and also Humanities Stream Plus members that are here in the green room. Hi, thanks for being here. And thanks for being members and being on camera. And also wanted to do a shout out to the Sign Network if you're watching our event on the Humanities Team website. Welcome. Or Humanities Team Facebook, YouTube channel. Welcome, everyone. And feel free to put in the comments where you're connecting from and also your questions. It's a live program, and Dr. Jonathan is here for your comments or questions. So try to get those in the first 30 to 40 minutes of the program, and feel free to post it in the chat. And let me share a little bit about our guest today. And some of you may know him as he's one of the Stream Plus providers, and he has an incredible weekly show called Soul Circles. So that's amazing. He's a two-time best-selling author with Hay House Publishing. Dr. Jonathan Ellerby has spoken at events along with Dr. Wayne Dyer, Dr. Deepak Chopra, Don Miguel Ruiz, Greg Braden, and many other international icons. With more than 35 years of study and 25 years of professional experience, Dr. Jonathan is known for his lighthearted style, enthusiastic, contagious energy, and I experienced that before this, and compassionate approach, translating his own extraordinary and wildly diverse experiences of holistic healing, spiritual experience, and peak performance into practical and personally relevant lessons for us all. Welcome, Dr. Jonathan.
Hello, that was delightful. Thank you. Very, very kind and generous of you. Thank you. I'm happy to be
Oh,
here.
well, we're excited to have you. And did you have some news to share about what's going on in your life? Like, uh,
Book, you
new
mean?
book?
Yeah, well, so the book that I'm, actively promoting as we record this is called The Seven Gateways of Spiritual Experience. And its official release date is February 20th of 2024. But I just started getting notes from people yesterday who said it's already shipping out. So people who have pre-ordered or people who do pre-order will get it before the bookstores. So that's kind of exciting. And I will take a moment to add. Can I take a moment to add something?
Of course, this is for you.
I want to say something about this book right off the bat. Because there aren't a lot of formats where I feel as at home, right? I feel like Humanities Team is a bit of my home, and I feel a lot of connection to the team there. And I will say that this book has surprised me in the way it's affected me. And what I mean by that is, listening to your description of my bio, the truth is I have spent so much of my life converting and translating spiritual lessons, spiritual practices, spiritual qualities and insights into practical applications in everyday settings, like for businesses or families or people in therapy and so on. But as a result, a lot of people don't get to spend time with me exploring the richness that I've been exposed to in the spiritual world and the incredible opportunities I've had to meet amazing people, to go to amazing places, and really to have the kinds of experiences that would give me the privilege of writing a book like this. And so as the book has started to release, I realize more and more how absolutely, well, not only important to me is the book, but really how important it is in our world today because it's a conversation that usually gets watered down or translated into ordinary settings. And we forget that radical states of consciousness and unexpected experiences and non-ordinary states are actually critical to the evolution of society, of humanity, and of course, the healing of any individual. So I just couldn't resist taking the chance to leap off that way because I know that's what Humanities Team is all about.
Yes, yes. Thank you for sharing that. Do you feel like now more than ever is a time where we need to be aware of these spiritual experiences that might be showing up for us?
Yes, and I think there's something very specific that's important for people to see and understand. There's a different nuance between spiritual principles and spiritual experiences. And I want to take a moment briefly to say something about why spiritual experiences are so critical. As you know, as your listeners know, as the Humanities Team community and well-wishers know, we are in an unprecedented time of human change and potential chaos and collapse. It doesn't mean that we are worse people than we ever were before. I don't think that's true. I think lots of things have evolved steadily over time, and we're pointed in a good direction in many ways, yet because of the scale of people's impact, because of the scale of people's influence, we now have fewer and fewer people who can disturb the balance for everyone in a matter of moments sometimes. In this way, the crisis is time sensitive. So whether it's political, economic, or environmental, we know that we're really only talking about decades to get things right. Now, here's why there's a difference between spiritual principles and spiritual experiences. We can teach anybody spiritual principles, but spiritual principles, like any principles, take time to learn, especially if they're new to us. Now, at the time of this recording, I have a young child turning 7 soon, and I have a young child turning 16 soon. And they are both at moments in their life where they are acquiring new skills. And as obvious and easy as those skills seem to me, I have to cultivate a lot of patience because something like cleaning a bedroom, getting dressed on time for school, or even being organized with schoolwork can be colossally challenging, uninteresting, or difficult for them. But to me, it seems like something everyone should get. So what's the connection here? Well, the connection is when we look at the therapeutic value of spiritual experiences, direct encounters of non-ordinary states, what we know even from medical fields, psychiatry, psychology, these kinds of experiences catapult people forward on their healing journey. In other words, these are accelerators of change. Now, I don't have those accelerators for my kids, but your listeners have access to all kinds of practices that they can do to optimize the chance to connect to these radical states in order to help themselves and our collective leap forward. So I think spiritual experiences are more critical now than ever.
Mm. That's so interesting. And I have kids as well. And I think that I call them my spiritual boot camp, because always having to just have the patience and love them through whatever struggles they're going through. So I can really relate to that. So we do have a question from Jeffrey. So let's get to that. Why do you think a spiritual leader like Marianne Williamson has been pushed out and rejected by the progressive politicians. Sorry, I'm laughing. The political question and shut down in the political arena. I'm sure you know the answer to this.
Yes, and I'm sure Jeffrey does too, but he's hoping that we'll
Bring
broadcast
it
it
out.
again. And I think it's important. Well, so first let
Okay.
me connect it to the topic of spiritual experience and then let me answer more directly. Uh, I think that one of the reasons why I am so passionate about the book and the message and spiritual experience for all people, this thing, um, is precisely because we are in a moment of cultural evolution where we have gone so far into what we might call generically the toxic masculine. And by that, I don't mean male. I mean that for 2,000 years, arguably more, depending when you start counting, the masculine consciousness, which is the one of conquest and the one of outgoing activity and the one of hierarchy and power over, um, has persisted and grown and grown and grown. Now, I will say, I don't believe that consciousness is innately toxic or wrong, but it must be in balance, as we've seen from Chinese medicine for 3,000 years. The yin yang principle is that both outward and inward, horizontal and vertical, achieving and digesting, all these things must work in balance, or we have disease of the self, disease of the family, disease of the culture or community. So what we're seeing, particularly in American politics, as much or more than many countries in the world, is quite literally the epitome of this masculine culture. And again, it doesn't matter the gender of the politicians. We see extreme division, right and left, as though there were no other shades. We see allegiances and alliances that are formed blindly at the expense of the issues or listening to people. And one of the things that allows this consciousness to prosper and to continue to feed itself and its grab for power is to diminish connectivity, to diminish collaboration, to diminish virtually all the principles that someone like Marianne Williamson stands for. So it's incredibly threatening to have a person like her on the stage. And I'll wrap up in just a moment, but I was thinking about the significance of her effort. And this has nothing to do whether I think she could actually do the job of president. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that her message has been incredibly important. And the very fact that she made it onto the stage, the very fact that hundreds of thousands, and in some cases, millions of Americans heard something different, that can begin to make a change. There's an old saying, a mind stretched to new dimensions can never return to what it once knew. And I think that more than actually becoming the president has been her gift. She's been the forerunner of change, planting seeds in people that maybe this combative, divisive, power over model is not what we need to go forward. So I think that's precisely why they've done whatever they could to undermine her and discredit her and move her out. And there's no surprise there. But thank goodness she made the effort. And I hope she continues to speak. And more importantly, I think, and I hope more and more credible voices with similar messages to her will find the courage to come forward and begin moving this consciousness to a place of balance, collaboration, and wholeness.
Hmm. That's so beautiful. I would give you a standing ovation if I didn't come off screen. I'm
I'll
sorry.
be running in the next election. No,
Okay, okay. Well, everybody
no,
vote
that
for
will not
Dr.
happen.
Jonathan.
That will
Yeah. But yes, it was just really inspiring what you said. And I just wanted to add, and I think it was also in your message that I feel like she empowers people like to say, look within and rise up, and don't put up with this. And that can be scary to governments.
Well, yeah, and let's just grab that for a second.
Okay.
I've come to believe, and this is, I can't say that this is well validated in terms of social science, although I think um, it's a pervasive opinion, which is that the unfortunate thing that's happened with religion and spiritual leadership over the last couple thousand years is that it has moved increasingly away from encouraging and fostering spiritual experience, which is the direct encounter
Mm,
of our own inner and higher guidance and goodness. And it has moved more and more towards reflecting this kind of extreme sort of conquest-oriented consciousness. And as a result, it's just, I'm going to just say it, it's my opinion, but it's my result that both consciously and unconsciously religious traditions and spiritual leaders, including in the non-religious field, um, have attempted to move people away from being empowered. And usually what that sounds like is trust me, follow,
hmm
listen to me, right? Read my book, use my practice, come to my church, and we have the answers for you. But I think most people listening here know that while those things may be helpful tools or guides in a way, the work must be internal. It has to be engaged. It has to be embodied. And then the challenge arises, which is when we have the direct encounter of spirit, something in us becomes resilient. Something in us becomes unstoppable because we now know that true power doesn't lie in institutions or authors or leaders or organizations. It lies in the mysterious energy of our common existence.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And another, yeah, we're getting some applauses from the audience from the green room. Yay. And then also helping us to rise above the 3D experience to see what is a lesson, what is the growth opportunity in this instead of being reactive and challenged by situations. So I think that's also another positive benefit.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, can you talk about your book a little bit more? The seven gateways. What are some of the gateways that we can encounter these spiritual experiences? Because I know, I mean, people are just seeking. They're searching. I mean, there's a surge in ayahuasca ceremonies and other ceremonies. So just curious about your take on it.
Yeah, thank you. So I totally agree with you. I think that if you read between the lines on social media, in mainstream media, everywhere you look, people are seeking a different experience of life, and they're seeking to alter their mindset. And this seems to come from two motivations. One is pain and the desire for distraction, right? So I think we need to be honest enough to admit that there's a lot of people, particularly the younger generation, that may not have a clear existential or spiritual goal that they're self-aware of. They just know they don't like what's going on at home, or they don't like what's going on around them, or they don't like what they're feeling. So to me, this is the soul's longing to not only move away from um, dissonance, but it's a longing to be more alive. It's a longing to be more whole. Then there's those who are seeking these kind of incredible experiences, and it is more explicitly spiritual. So we see ayahuasca everywhere, and we hear talk about psilocybin everywhere. and we
Mhm.
hear about cannabis use in all kinds of creative forms. Now, what's intriguing to me about this, and even the research that's coming out about this, that I wouldn't mind commenting on, and then circling back to something that brings it all together, is that because of this style of consciousness in our culture, there's a preoccupation with the path, with the practice, with the substance, right? So what you see in the news items or what you see in social media are a lot of attention around the mushroom or the ayahuasca or the teacher, right? So the philosophy, the practice, or the teacher,
Mm.
these are the sort of vehicles that help us on the spiritual path. They're all important. Philosophy, practice, teacher. But the problem is that those things are meant to be windows, not walls. And so when people become attached to the material culture, then rather than talking about what it leads them to, we get a whole Netflix special about mushrooms, which is great. I think that's fine and wonderful. But the real magic that people are craving, the healing, the transformation, the value is in the experience. So, what are those experiences? And that's what we're going to talk about in a moment from my book.
Yeah.
What are those experiences that are calling people? And I find in my experience and my research and working with people over all these years, there are 7 key types of spiritual experience. And understanding the 7 types or categories allows for a few important things. So, first of all, we can talk about it. When you don't have language, a conversation is difficult. Seems kind of obvious, but it's important. The next thing is that a lot of people are having spiritual experiences. I think everyone listening here is having spiritual experiences all the time. But then there's this problem that sometimes, and this is common for spiritual seekers, we idealize some types of spiritual experiences. Like right now, the psychedelics are being lifted up, but then we undermine others, like mindfulness-based experiences or experiences in the body or with yoga or food or sex. So
Mhm.
these trends can't dominate where we find our spirituality, and knowing the 7 types allows us to be more open, more curious, and to more quickly acknowledge when something has happened that we can then reflect on, digest, and integrate. That's where the transformation happens, actually. It's sometimes in the actual experience, but for many of these types of experience, it's really what you do with it that changes everything. Do you want to go into these 7 types now, or do you want to
If
cover
you,
something else first?
yeah, I mean, well, we can also open it up to questions before we go on. So that's good. We have a comment from YouTube, Georgia. She says, yes, seeking, hungry, starving, and trying hard to connect.
Hmm.
So she's
So,
resonating with what you say. Mhm.
well, let me say something to Georgia. First of all, keep going, right? Please, please. This is important because this longing is it's not purely psychological, right? It's not just that something's missing. To me, it's a memory, right? It's a memory of something we feel in our body, or I would say in our soul. And so it's recovering our wholeness, recovering the memory of where we come from and what we are. And so there is I sounded funny. I was going to say there is an answer. Sounds a little too much like a gospel or something. But
Yeah, that's
but the point
okay.
is sometimes people doubt themselves. Like I'm looking, I'm looking, I'm looking, will I find it? And the very longing itself is a spiritual experience. The very longing itself is evidence of the thing we're looking for. But I wanted to share an exercise for Georgia and others who feel like they're seeking greater spiritual growth and experiences because sometimes that passionate drive for that whole spiritual self is clouded by the influence of a lifetime being conditioned in this masculine Western consciousness, which is that the masculine Western mind tends to be striving and comparative. Striving and comparative. So, yeah, I went to a retreat and yeah, I had a wonderful weekend, but gosh, I feel the same now that I'm back at work. Like, what a terrible person am I? Oh, I read this book and it really uplifted me and I was so motivated and I felt like, Eckhart Tolle was really speaking to me. But now I got angry at my dog for peeing on the carpet. What a terrible person. And so
Sounds
that,
like me.
right? So all this judgment comes back in and comparison.
Yeah,
Wow,
or shame. You're supposed to
shame.
be spiritual, and
Right,
then
right.
you're mad at your dog.
Right. Look how spiritual she is. Ooh, look how spiritual he is. And I'm like, what the heck? So,
Oh, you almost swear. Okay,
well, I
I'm
just thought
just
I'd
teasing you.
respect the program, but I
Yes.
do swear a lot. So here's an exercise. A lot of people have heard of gratitude journals. So when you go to bed at night, you write three things or something like that, a list of things you're grateful for. And in some gratitude journals, you have a set number of things you're grateful for every day. In some gratitude journals, you have to think of something new every day, whatever. You get the idea. That's a great exercise. But I have another exercise, and actually, it fits really well with the 7 types. It's to do a spiritual experience journal. And it's just at the end of the day before bed or sometime in the late evening, I recommend to stop, be in a meditative state, take some time to be with your breath, to build a feeling of silence within and around you, and then think about your day, reflect on it, walk back through it emotionally and mentally, visualize it, and ask yourself, were there any moments where you might consider that spirit was peeking through, that spirit was tapping you on the shoulder, that spirit was somehow felt, even if there was no message. And you might think, you know, from the cliche, well, it was kind of funny and nice that I was so stressed about that appointment and I was worried it wasn't going to be okay and everything was falling apart. And then I got that parking spot right in front. A lot of people like the parking spot example. Well, okay, take it. Or maybe it's the memory of one precious moment in a chaotic day of work and whatever, kids or neighbors or whatever you deal with. But you just remember that one precious moment as you poured your morning coffee and everyone was busy and there was just quiet for 60 seconds. And you noticed the way the snow was falling and there was glistening light and something just took your breath away. And then the dog was barking again and you ran off. But there are moments of beauty, of magic, of unexpected phenomena, of chance encounters and synchronicities that are happening to us all the time and every day. What if we were to look back at our day, not our life, our day, as a poem or a film or a chapter in a book, and we were to ask, wow, what what were those spiritual cues or signs or feelings? And you'll be surprised that we're all having some measure of connection all the time. Only we don't take the time to feel it, to name it, and to draw something deeper from it.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. And it's like once you start paying attention to those feelings
Mm.
inside as a spiritual experience, and like you said, maybe not comparing it to an ayahuasca or a psilocybin experience, that they're all beautiful and
Yes.
valued. And that's why you recommended the journal
Yeah.
because it's like when you write it down, you're valuing that, correct?
Yes. So great. Let's just briefly talk about why would you do the journal. So as you say, first of all, it's recognizing this stuff's happening more than I think. It's valuing and appreciating it, but then it's also doing something else, which is it's opening your attention because the more you practice, I mean, try this for a whole month. The more you practice doing that journal at the end of the day, the more you'll wake up the next day with a curious mind and an open heart, ooh, where's it going to be today? And I believe, and many traditions and teachers have taught this for thousands of years, that spirituality is kind of a two-way street. That as much as we seek connection with a greater realm or reality, that greater reality is also seeking us. But it it's energized by our search. Now, I'm not saying moments of grace don't happen or that we don't randomly have spiritual experiences. And please, we don't need to have psychedelics to have spiritual experiences. Those can happen. But, meditation, breath work, yoga, qigong, tai chi, church, synagogue, sweat lodge, spiritual experiences, radical spiritual experiences can happen just about anywhere. But there is something about cultivating willingness, cultivating devotion, cultivating attention that potentiates the possibility that some of those more radical states will break through.
Wow, that's amazing. This is really fascinating, this conversation to me. And I was curious about what you mean by a gateway. Is a gateway to you yoga, meditation? Would that be your definition?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I'll be honest, it's a confusing word that we chose
Okay.
for the title. And I
Okay.
love my publisher. I love my publisher. This one is with Finhorn Press, and they've been doing brilliant things for decades. And I think they're now an imprint of Simon and Schuster. So this is great. I love what I'm going to say is not a lack of gratitude.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. If they're listening, right? You don't
yeah.
want that.
I think the reason why we chose the word gateway was because we wanted people to feel like there's an invitation, right? There's something to go through, there's something to go towards. But really, no, we're not talking about yoga. So I wrote a book called Return to the Sacred. And Return to the Sacred essentially looks at the world's spiritual practices over time and throughout history and, different cultures. And the intention was to reduce the types of spiritual practices. Originally, I was hoping to get it down to one or two, like maybe there's an archetype behind them all. And what I found was there's really four categories to me of spiritual practices, things to do to have spiritual experiences. And in those four categories, which are mental, emotional, physical, and spiritually oriented categories, there are arguably three core actual practices. So, meaning we have an inventory of 12 in the book, Return to the Sacred. So, if someone says, well, gosh, okay, I'm sold. I want spiritual experiences. What do I do? I would say check out Return to the Sacred because it
Mm.
literally reviews 12 things to do. On the other hand, Spiritual Experience, the book, talks about these seven uh, types of spiritual experience, which maybe we should finally talk
Okay.
about. Um, and it helps people to understand uh, what's it like when it's happening. So I describe every one of them from the inside out and share stories of other people's experience of the same type of experience. So you can say, oh, I know that happened to me, or oh, this is happening to me. And then it also helps you understand, so what's the value of this experience? What does this kind of experience teach you? And what might you do with it? So it's pretty fun actually because instead of just being kind of an analytical sort of research overview of seven states of consciousness, which it is, it's really like an adventure because the stories are from all over the world. There's stories of experiences in Africa, in China, in Indigenous America, in Hawaii, in Peru. I mean, it's cool. I have to admit, I look at it now and I'm like, gosh, who's this lucky guy? So, can I take a moment and go through the experiences?
Yeah, yeah. Before you do that, I just want to share another
Yeah.
comment from Jeffrey. This is an opportunity for a history lesson about putting the spiritual experience into practice in 70s documentary American Commune on Amazon. So,
Oh, wow. Great. Thank you for
Interesting.
that, Jeffrey.
Yeah. Thank you.
American Commune on
Okay.
Amazon.
Yes.
Well, and I think, Jeffrey, I'll also say thank you because, especially with Humanity's Team and all the other streaming services out there, and I don't even mean the spiritual ones, if you just take a little time to look, you'll find all kinds of evidence of how spiritual lives can unfold, the power of spirituality. But I'm going to go one step further and say, if you're curious about the power of spiritual experience, just this one idea, I would say, I would say it's everywhere and it's in every discipline. If you look at the Beatles and the sessions that were recorded and played, I mean, this is ridiculous because we're on a streaming platform and we're talking about other streaming platforms. But anyway, I think it's on Disney. And I don't know, remember the name, but I think you may know the documentary got a lot of attention as they showed them recording live and what their process was like. There's no question that there was a kind of spiritual chemistry between these four that allowed them to access a level of creativity that is, was, and will be unprecedented and rare. You hear Paul McCartney sit at a guitar and say, well, what if it sounded like this? And right off the top of the head, Hey Jude comes out. And you're thinking, what's going on? People write and write and write just to get one song that some people will like, much less the whole planet. If you look at documentaries about athletes, you look at documentaries about innovators, inventors, problem solvers. You look at documentaries about, I just saw this incredible documentary, Common Ground, about regenerative agriculture and the food industry. And if you pay attention, what you'll see is that many of the pioneers, the groundbreakers, the leaders in so many fields, when they are driven towards common good and they are inspired to unexpected innovation, there's usually some kind of spiritual experience behind it. They've had an aha moment. They've had a dream to follow. They've had an intuition, a felt sense. In some cases, even the feeling of being guided by ancestors. And
Mm.
it's everywhere from the Grammys to solving water problems in Africa. We even know that Einstein's work was fed, and some of his most critical discoveries and theories came from his dream life. So I just wanted to leap off Jeffrey's reference to documentaries to say, yes, check out the ones about spiritual growth. But you know what? If you look anywhere where you see extraordinary innovation and powerful impact, you'll probably find a spiritual experience tucked in there somewhere.
Yeah, and there's incredible documentaries on Stream Plus as well. There's one called The Field,
Yes.
and yeah, that's an incredible one. And measuring the frequencies of healing, and so yeah, let's get back to your seven gateways. Did you want to go through that, or just mention a few?
Yeah, well, it doesn't take long. I can do all seven quite quickly.
Oh, okay.
So I think of them as types. Seven types of spiritual experience. So just to sound a little more, um, official or academic, um, sometimes I call them sets, like set one. So spiritual experience type one set. Set one for poetry in the book, I call experiences of truth and beauty. And these are what I would relate to presence and mindfulness. So they are moments in an ordinary day where we're going about our business and then something breaks through and we have sort of uh, a glistening moment. It's usually sense related. The mind grows quiet, the heart opens, and there's just a moment of feeling, not necessarily aha, but ah. It's just the ah experience. And in these precious moments, everything feels okay. And the world feels beautiful. And we feel like we've touched something true. And those things matter. You could even feel that watching the Grammys or walking your dog. So let's not forget experiences of truth and beauty. The second one, set to, are experiences of ordinary magic. Now, ordinary magic is the category, let's say, of miracles, radical healings, and unexplained phenomena in everyday life. So, ordinary refers to the fact that we're not engaged in a practice necessarily. We're not in an unusual setting. Maybe we're at the doctor or maybe we're in traffic, but there's a radical synchronicity, unexplained phenomena, extreme healing, radical remission, so on. Um, the third category is the experience of the spirit world. And this means that we encounter a being that is not in a body, although sometimes they'll be in a body, somebody else's body. So this might be seeing a ghost, right? The ghost of a relative or an ancestor. This is sort of the paranormal field. But I extend this because any encounter of any being, whether it's your grandfather or uh, Krishna or, some divine entity, if it's a being with a human-like characteristic or quality or an animal with an interactive personal quality, then that falls into the category of spirit world. So there's a sense of embodiment. You can dialogue with them and they have their own integrity. The next experience is the experience of the cosmic self. Now, experiences of the cosmic self, think of out of body experiences, near death experiences, dreams where we become lucid, or maybe dreams where we have supernatural powers. So we are no longer in ordinary settings. We are now in a fully altered state, and we are experiencing the self as extraordinary or superhuman, supernatural, metaphysical. We come back from these experiences and they feel real and like we've understood something that may look outrageous, and yet somehow it feels real and true. We're almost done. The next category is the category of divine energy, which you could also call subtle energy. And certainly this is looked at by the field of energy medicine, The Field by Lynn McTaggart, your great documentary on Humanity's Team. So much actually of Humanity's Team. In fact, there is a
Yeah.
documentary or course on Humanity's Team for
Yeah.
each one of these seven. So
Yeah, that was like
interesting.
Tippy Roz, but that's okay. Lynn McTaggart has amazing research as
Oh, sorry.
like,
I thought you were
yeah,
referring to
she
Lynn
has the
McTaggart.
power of but she's talking about the field that creates, but yeah, there's another documentary, but that's okay. It's
Yes.
all
Well,
good.
thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
So, in experience of divine energy, we are usually seeing, perceiving, feeling, becoming subtle energy. So, this is very often the realm of psychedelics. So, we cease to see the world of form and we see the energy within or behind the form. This can also happen without psychedelics. In fact, in the book Spiritual Experience, which is filled, I mean, filled with more stories of spiritual experiences than you can shake a stick at. None of them are medicinally, drug, or psychedelically related. And that was to make a point that yes, we get it. Those things can happen and they are important and powerful, but that's not a requirement. So I just wanted to make that note. And then we have the last two, which are more radical for sure, less common, and these are the types that we classically associate with mysticism. Now, mysticism can be generalized to be any of these non-ordinary states, but from an academic perspective, mysticism in comparative religion is typically understood as the direct perception of ultimate reality. That sounds pretty good, right? So, in experiences of the formless spirit, which is set 6, we feel that we are seeing, encountering God itself, consciousness itself, our source or the substance of reality. Now, the one thing that stands out unique in this, as opposed to the last step we're going to take, is that while it is an enlightenment experience, and while there is a non-dual, non-being quality because you see the oneness of spirit, the pervasiveness of spirit, there is still a residue of subject object awareness. So I am seeing God as the cosmos is God. I am experiencing the oneness of life. I am in the field of interconnection. So the form of reality dissolves, but the observer doesn't. In the final category, set 7, it's called pure consciousness. And this is one of the more debated and questioned and studied experiences in academic circles because it is so unusual, not just in frequency, but in terms of how do we account for it. In the experiences of pure consciousness, the subject object division completely dissolves. So there is no observer. We literally in that moment cannot even grasp the awareness that we are seeing something, feeling something. It is not the perception of oneness, it is the absolute dissolving into oneness. So it can be called the undifferentiated unity of being. Pretty good. So typically, when we come out of that experience, it is something like waking up from a dream, although we know we haven't been asleep. It's a bit like blacking out while awake. And so it's categorically different because what happens when we return to ordinary consciousness after this, usually running through some of the other stages or sets before we come back, it's a little bit more like a download was put on the phone and now we have to tap it and it blossoms. So the experience itself is beyond description, and then its meaning and value unfolds in usually in the hours and days that follow. There you go.
That's wonderful. And you do you share your own experiences through
I
these gateways in the book? So
I share a vivid, detailed, tactile, colorful, like you were there experiencing it for each of them. Yeah, it's cool. And actually it's funny because Steve Farrell, your
the CEO.
co-founder and CEO
Mhm.
and director, I don't know all the titles he's got, but he made the comment. He was like, wow, like reading this is kind of like a spiritual experience because if you're really relaxed and you allow yourself to be transported by each story, you enter into those fields. So I think it is. I think it's true. I mean, it kind of happened for me actually, because I'd written it actually a little while ago, and then it kind of rested a bit, and I waited before looking for a publisher, and then when I picked it up again to reread it, I was like, oh my gosh, oh my God.
You're in awe of your work.
Yeah,
That's
like
wonderful. That's powerful. Well, we have another comment from Facebook. Beta says spirituality makes life more interesting, more easy, and always in an ecstasy. I completely agree to all you said. It's magical.
hmm. Thank you. So let me, and who said that?
Beta.
Ada. Okay, well, thank you. And let me add a couple things or draw out two things in there that you said that are so important. So one is that I think one of the innate values, in case there is anyone listening thinking, oh, this all sounds a little too good to be true, is that one of the things that spiritual experience and the spiritual journey does for us is it facilitates expansion. Now, why does that matter? Typically, when we're in a moment of crisis, stress, struggle, or breakdown, we are in a moment of contraction, contracted awareness, narrowing of focus. So we feel like there's nothing but this traffic. There's nothing but being late for this meeting. There's nothing but this argument. There's
Mm.
nothing but this physical illness. There's nothing but this addiction. We collapse. We collapse into a narrow focus that robs us of our sense of hope or choice or perspective. And being connected to spiritual experience or the spiritual path continuously lifts us out of the moment and allows us to observe it, to question it, to learn from it, to remember we have choice, to remember that we have agency, and to remember that we're part of a bigger story and that maybe that story holds meaning and opportunity and change that we haven't even touched or seen yet. The other thing, though, that she mentioned that I think is so important is I think it's so important that we understand that spirituality is not all mental. It's not all about insights and ideas and figuring things out. In fact, I'd say if there's anything that my life's journey into spiritual traditions has taught me, it's how non-mental spirituality is and how significant it is to let spirituality connect you with your body, with your senses, with your extra senses. And so when she writes or says, that it makes life magical, yeah, I mean, uh, I use coffee just as an example because so many people drink it. But if you take that coffee and you hold that cup or tea, could even be water or juice, I guess, and you take a moment just to question, um, where did this come from? And what hands picked these beans? And under what sun uh, was this growing? We suddenly realize that even the simplest daily routine can become a ritual of communion. And we can engage the smells and we can notice the tastes and how that warmth feels in our body. And all of a sudden, we become engaged in the present moment and aware of the fact that every single day of our life is so much more than just what we think it is. There's thought and feeling and sensation and so much more.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You know, I started incorporating that into my eating and drinking life because I read an article about it's an Indigenous way
Mm.
to eat, appreciating, thinking about being of gratitude. Where is this coming from? So that's so wonderful that you brought that up.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it's a practice that
Yeah.
can cultivate that first type of spiritual experience, which is truth and beauty. And it's really to create a moment of communion through reflection with our food and drink. And really, and I'm sorry because I'm taking so much time for this, but you've emphasized it. I actually think this is one of the most potent practices people can try. We talked about that journal, but there's a few reasons behind that. If I could just take maybe 1 minute.
Mhm.
The first is that most of our meals are an extraordinary opportunity to contemplate interconnection and interdependence. We have tomatoes from California, and we have bread that's made in a local bakery, and then we have a coffee bean that's coming from Ethiopia or Colombia or something like that. I mean, literally, we can travel the world with a meal, or as in the case where I live, most of what we consume comes from 50 miles from here. And so it's a deeper relationship to place, but it's also a relationship to people, the people that wake up before the sun rises to pick your food, to drive the trucks, to deliver it to your grocery store. There are hearts and minds behind every single ounce of energy that goes into your body. And we can contemplate the sunlight that feeds the plants, the waters that nourish the soil, and on and on and on. And finally, behind the gratitude for it all, what I hope is that we cultivate this sense of stewardship and we begin to question, yeah, this does come from the land. And how do I treat the land? And this does depend on the rains. And what do I put into the atmosphere? We are absolutely interconnected with all life. And it's a spiritual principle and realization. But when we internalize it as an experience, it becomes a practical way of living.
Hmm. Wonderful. Well, we're getting to the end of our program, and I wanted to highlight your program on humanities team, Soul Circles. So, what is this program about? Because I wanted to play a clip on it. What is,
Oh,
yeah.
oh, I didn't think anyone would ever play a clip. Well, so it's a weekly gathering, almost every week of the year. I travel from time to time, so sometimes I miss it. But typically, it's a combination of some consistent elements that get juggled around each time. So first of all, it's meant to be dynamic and interactive. It's meant to be a sense of community as much as it is a class, right? So it's not like I'm the teacher, I've got all the answers, make your notes, we're done. It's more like I'll have a theme. We might do a meditation on it. We might do a guided visualization on it. Then I would typically talk about it. People would share their experiences of the meditation or their reaction to the topic. Maybe there's question and answer. And once in a while, we'll even do breakout groups. So, um, you know, it's the same basic elements in different combinations every week. Lots of people come that are regulars. They're always welcoming and inviting, but you can also drop in once a year, once a month, and you're always going to feel welcome and that you are in a community that wants to see you, that wants to interact with you, and that cares if you want to contribute. And lots of people want to be quiet and just listen, and that's fine too.
Well, yeah, that's wonderful. I'd love to play a clip right now if you have that or video.
Yeah, the one thing I didn't say is that the themes vary,
Oh,
and it's
okay.
typically about, the kinds of things we've been talking about, spirituality in everyday life. It's broad in its orientation, but we might cover anything from death and dying to metaphysical experiences to energy healing. And I'm very open to the feedback and input of the group.
Okay.
Okay,
Wonderful.
now
So,
the clip.
yeah, we'll play. We have just a few minutes, so we'll play a quick clip. Thank you.
Okay, so truth and beauty. The experience of truth and beauty is probably the most ordinary of experiences. I think they're experiences that we all have frequently, and yet they're often not called spiritual. And I don't think they're often held for very long. So moments of truth and beauty for me really relate to present moment awareness and mindfulness. Moments of truth and beauty are moments in a day in which something simple or regular or ordinary suddenly becomes vital, vibrant, and somehow connecting, inspiring, uplifting. So it can be as simple as waiting for a bus and you're caught up in your day and you're rushed and you finally get to the bus stop and you didn't think you were going to make it. And there's just this moment of relief. And suddenly, for the first time, instead of, let's say, being afraid of the cold all day and rushing your errands, and it's just an illustration, you stop and you realize how quiet the street is. You notice the snow falling gently, and your eye catches the shining crystals of each flake, and you just have a little moment that takes your breath away. You just see how beautiful things are. And then what the
Oh,
heck? So this is something that we recorded recently,
yes,
and you can
yes.
tell it's about, we were talking about one of the experiences in the book.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah,
I love
so this is
that.
covered that. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, our time is up already. I feel like I could talk to you for like 3 hours. I have like 10 other questions. Well, thank you everyone in the green room for joining us. And if you're not a member of Humanities Stream Plus, I would highly encourage you to join, get access to Dr. Jonathan every week and to our other incredible spiritual teachers and programs. I think the hottest program right now also is Mystical Journeys, incredible about exactly what Dr. Jonathan was talking about, having these mystical spiritual experiences. Well, I wanted to thank the production team, Jim Gray, Garth Catterall, Dee Meyer, Andy Gutsky, Nanette Kennedy, Abby Johnson, and the rest of Humanities team. And it's been such a pleasure connecting with you, Jonathan, and hearing more about Soul Circles and your book. So everybody buy his book. Yeah. The
No,
Seven
thank you so much.
Gateways of Spiritual Experience. Yes, go ahead, Jonathan.
No, I want to just thank you. Thank you for such a wonderful time together and being so gracious and for having me here. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you for joining us today, everybody. Have a wonderful day.